Hi, everyone. Good evening. Tonight we are talking about adapting habits. As we talk about, this week we have been looking at the Momentum Club and really getting together to manage our habits. And so tonight, Dr. Kirsty Griffiths is going to be joining me, and we're going to talk about when things go wrong with habits and how we are really working to adapt those habits. What can we do when a habit has maybe gone off track, gone off the rails? We want to work with that habit. What can we do about that? And I think that's something that a lot of us have experienced recently in this past year. Hi, Kirsty.
Hello, how are we doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. I'm just adjusting my volume. Okay, we're good to go.
Nice. It's good to see you.
Nice to see you too.
I was just introducing our topic tonight of really talking about habits and how sometimes we have to change them. And I think you and I both experienced quite a bit of that over the past year, 2 years.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So when I was thinking about Momentum Club and what peer support has meant to that, and I knew you and I were going to talk, I was like, oh, can we talk about this? And you were kind enough to agree.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's an important thing that is not being talked enough about enough right now.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. So for those of you joining who don't know Dr. Griffiths, Dr. Kirsty Griffiths is a chiropractor and a yoga instructor, and she is author of the Back to Wellness workbook and creator of the Back to Wellness program, which is a 12-week yoga, mindset, chiropractor program to like reset your back pain. And what I love about the work that you do, and what I think is really great, is that you're adapting things for people all the time. You like bring that, I know that you bring that to your yoga classes and your yoga programs. Like, you're not a one size fits all kind of person.
No.
Can you share a bit about that and like where that comes from? I'm guessing it's your yoga training, but it could be your general awesomeness. So
That's a good question. I think I've had experiences in the past where a one size fits all medical approach has been used on me, and feeling like there were things that were missing because I didn't feel like the problems were being assessed or treated holistically. So when I decided to pursue a career in healthcare, I wanted to be different. I wanted to have the same kind of experience, or offer the same kind of experience that I had, which was actually with a naturopathic doctor who I felt for the first time asked me all the right questions and just, took the blinders off and saw the whole picture. And it's interesting that you say recently that, I've been adapting with the yoga program because I just started up my in-person program again in September after a year. The last time I ran it was last fall. And this time it was really interesting because in the past, I think I've run maybe 5 other sessions previously, and I was very much like by the book of what I had created, because up until that point, it worked. Like, all the content that I had made, I could follow it to a T with how I had written it. But I realized when I went to teach my first class in September that we're not the same as we were a year ago. And there were a lot of things that didn't feel relevant anymore, or new things that I wanted to bring in. A lot more of an emphasis on like building community. So for example, we started our class the other night and we started with a 1-word opener to just set the groundwork for how everyone was feeling coming into the practice. And I think before I did a lot more of teaching and talking to people, but not reciprocating that by asking people how they're feeling and kind of encouraging that dialogue on the other side. So it is interesting how, as we shift and change and go through these transitions, it asks us to approach things in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Chris. I think that's really, really beautiful that you're saying, even with what's going on right now, even how things are changing, you're looking at, oh, I don't want to keep doing this the way that I always have.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think this can happen, a lot. And sometimes it's health things that come up. I think of, how my own habits changed over this year. And I had some physical health challenges earlier in 2021. I wasn't able to have the physical stamina that I normally have. And so things like going for a walk, even though it's January and snowy or February and icy, that was always my go-to. I could always do that. And I wasn't physically capable of doing that for a while. And then when the physical capability came back, it was like, it felt like starting from scratch, right? Of like, oh, I've lost this habit. Of course, we're not starting from scratch. We're starting from experience.
Yes.
But pulling in new meaning, like I was like, I'm going to walk. And then like, I hurt myself.
Right.
My legs were really sore from like trying to engage at a level that I hadn't been in, that I hadn't been in for a long time.
Right.
And
yeah.
We can do that with our health habits when something comes up and we're not able to access them for whatever reason, whether that's a physical health reason, emotional health, lack of access. I know a lot of people through this pandemic with their physical health, when the gyms closed, that was really hard because that was part of their fitness ritual and their fitness routine, their fitness community, and they lost all that. And for some folks, that was really hard for them to keep moving. And yes, we're open now. We're getting into those places, but you can't necessarily start where you were.
Yes, that is so true. And something that I am seeing a lot every time we come out of lockdown and the gyms reopen. And we see this, I think, also around New Year's when people are making resolutions for their health, where we go from where we are to the end goal without remembering that there's a lot of steps in between.
Yeah.
So when people start going back to the gym after they haven't been to the gym in 4 months because we were locked down, and they go back the first week and they go 5 days in a row, that is just like overload for the body. So it's not to say you can't get there, but I totally agree with you that sometimes we have to recognize that there is going to be a little bit of a progression because of these gaps that we've had in the habits that we have around our health.
Yeah, and it's hard, and it's okay that you're not necessarily, I think that first part is like awareness and vision and understanding ourselves. And it's really easy to forget that we're not who we think we are, right? Like, I don't know, I'm not someone that goes to the gym 5 days a week, so I'm not under a delusion that I can just start doing that tomorrow. Yeah. But I was under the delusion that I could still walk 5 kilometers every day.
Right.
And that was not true because I had not been doing that. And so I still have that capability. Now I'm back to walking 5 kilometers. That's fine at this point. But I couldn't start there even though I'd been there before.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the practice of coming back to our habits and looking at them and saying like, okay, well, where's this actually at right now? Not where do I think it's at? Where has this been at when it was the best?
Optimal, yeah.
But where is it at now? Yeah. And what's the next thing that I can add to it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's also important to recognize that with your health habits, you can have something that looks similar that you might already have a routine around. But if we're talking about something different, it's going to be a different trajectory. So, for example, I would consider myself to be a generally fit person. You know, I was continuing to exercise throughout the pandemic, but I took up a new hobby, which was running. And yeah, it's totally not my thing normally, but I just had this urge to do something completely different. I have never wanted to run before in my life, but there was something that shifted in me where yoga wasn't serving me the way that it did before. And I needed something that I could kind of like move energy through my body at a higher intensity or frequency.
Yeah.
But realizing that even though I am at a certain level of fitness with yoga or with, you know, dance or whatever, running is its own thing. So it was a very slow climb, like starting with a 3-minute walking interval and a 1-minute running interval, and progressing that with a program that took 3 months for me to get to a point where I could run for 25 minutes consistently. So it's also, you know, sometimes I think it's easy for us to generalize. If we have one health habit, it's like, and it just might be a little bit different depending on if you're adding in something that's completely new that you don't have experience with before.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. Thank you for sharing that, Kirsty. I think there's a lot there. When I'm talking about exercise in the Tranquil Minds program, I'm always talking about peaceful pauses and power pushes, right? And as different ways of moving energy. And if you have an exercise regimen that is more peaceful, is more yin building, more calming, like a lot of folks yoga practice is, not that there's not ways to practice yoga in a power push mode, because there definitely is, but running is very much in that power zone. It's great for transforming feelings. It's really great for taking frustration, for example. Not saying that was yours, I'm just saying it's one that's out there. And moving that into something else, and really using physical movement to transform those activities. But it's not the same, right? If you're mostly doing the peaceful pauses, add some power pushes in, but it's going to take time before 100%. You can fully switch to doing a lot of that higher intensity.
And I think it took a while for me to even figure out that what I had always known, the habits that I had already created, they weren't working for me that way anymore. The usual tools that I leaned into for coping, they just weren't doing the things that they used to. So even just getting to the point where there's an acknowledgement of, this thing doesn't seem to fit quite the way that it used to, is like maybe the first phase. And then trying to figure out, well, what does that look like? Like, where do we go from here to change it? But I feel like that's really related to what you're talking about tonight, which is why I was excited to have this conversation, because as someone who has personally experienced a lot of that in the last year, I think it's important.
Yeah. And I think this is when you take opportunity to go back and revisit things. You get the opportunity to say like, oh, look how much I've grown in my fitness pillar, for example. Like, I've put in these new pieces, or like, this looks very different than I expected it to. And oh, it's not actually serving it for me. And that's one of the things that I'm looking forward to in the Momentum Club, is we're going to be cycling through goals and strategies, but we're also going to be cycling through the pillars in that I teach in the Tranquil Minds program. And so our first week, we're having this nutrition module where we're going to talk about menu planning and really like hacking your menu plan, making it easy. I menu plan 4 weeks worth of dinners in an hour.
That's amazing. That's a superpower.
Right? But like, I've gotten really good at it, and I have a system, and it's like a thing, and that's what I do. And so I'm excited to share that, but it's also an opportunity to reflect. And every time I go do my 4-week menu plan, I get to look back and be like, what worked well? What didn't work well? Sometimes they're aspirational meal plans, right? And you get to the end of it and you're like, I actually ordered out way more than this board says I was going to. Okay, what's actually coming up in the next 4 weeks? Can I do this thing that I think I want to do? Or do I need to, this week, this 4-week one is starting this week coming up. And my husband's going to be traveling for work. Apparently work travel's a thing again, for him anyway. Okay. And so I'm like, well, scale it back. Get some takeout. Cook some pasta. Like, you don't need to do all the things every time. And I think there's I have noticed in my clinical practice, treating anxiety and working with lifestyle medicine, that there is a real gift in returning to looking at habits and saying like, how is this working? and
Yeah,
realizing that what serves you in a season isn't going to always work.
totally.
Yeah.
I want to learn about your menu process because that sounds amazing. Like I'm just thinking of how beneficial that would be for people to not just because the way you're describing it, you're not just talking about giving people recipes. You're talking about teaching them how you do this so that they
Oh,
can.
yeah. So, I mean, I've got a menu plan to share. Like, if you
Yeah,
just want some recipes, you can have that, but you can get those anywhere on the internet. And honestly, they don't work very well because they're
right,
not your food, right? Like,
right,
I don't want to, I honestly, I'm sure you eat delicious food, but I don't want your menu plan
right.
because
Yeah,
I want to cook the things that I like to eat that I know my family likes to eat.
yeah, for sure.
Um, and so, yeah, this is a like bring your own recipes. Like, what do you love to eat? Let's show up and I'll teach you how to come up with the categories and a
Yes,
system so that you can plug it in. The
exactly.
cool thing is for, I mean, like, I'm a junkie for cooking. I love cooking new things. I love new food. It's my favorite hobby. Like,
Yeah,
I love it. And so for me, coming up with a new menu plan every 4 weeks is like super fun.
yeah,
But for people who don't like this, who are like, menu planning, not my jam,
yeah,
make a 4 week one or make a 6 week one and then just repeat it
right.
forever.
Yeah,
Like, there's no reason why you need a new 4 week menu plan every 4 weeks
every
unless
time. Yeah,
you're like it brings you joy.
yeah,
Like, yeah. So, I mean, I'm hoping that it will be fun for people like me that love to cook and want a menu plan all the time, and that
yeah,
it's really practical for people where this is like a really big struggle. Is like, oh my
yes,
God, what am I going to eat for dinner, and how do I feed myself, and how can I
yeah,
make that easier?
yeah. And I think having that skill right now is so useful because with the pandemic, there's like a whole layer of just fatigue for things that normally maybe came easy to us, but they just don't right now.
Yeah.
And I think cooking is one of those things where maybe in the past you haven't had to think about that too much. It's just been easy to think of what you're going to make, to get the groceries, to cook the food. But then when your capacity is stretched so thin in so many different dimensions, I know for me, cooking became one of the things that became very difficult, like
Yeah.
very anxiety provoking, wasn't something I was looking forward to. And so I think having some strategy around that and even just having the conversations to be like, maybe that's normal right now. And maybe you're not the only one who's experiencing that, you
If
know?
you are having anxiety attacks trying to cook dinner, that is normal right now, and you
Yes.
are not alone.
Yes.
Like, multiple people have told me about this.
Yeah.
If cooking is the only peace of mind you get from your family and you like shutting the doors and cooking, that's also normal. It's
Yeah.
also, if that's your respite, that's fine too. There are lots of ways. Anyway, we got deep into October's masterclass topic, which was not what I was going to talk about tonight. As soon as I start talking about food, I can't stop.
We gave a nice little teaser.
Yeah. But yeah, no, it's going to be really fun. But I think I can't really think of a habit that doesn't lend itself well to like periodically checking in and pivoting on it, whether that's like your bedtime routine or how you meditate or like even like home organization and like where your stuff is. Like, feel like every once in a while, spring cleaning or whatever, you're just like, oh, maybe I should take these sweaters and put them in the back of my closet since I don't need them right now.
Right.
Like these little like functional check-ins that
Yeah.
keep you focused. And when we were talking, Christy, about like the fatigue of the times we are living in and how there's decisions and all these things are high stakes and it wears on our decision fatigue and we're all out of surge capacity and we're just like, it's our habits that drive that, because when you can do something without thinking about it, when it becomes easy and you're just like, oh, I just, you know, made myself some hot water and lemon because it's the evening and I felt like something to drink. Like, when that's not even a thought,
Right.
you know, you can get support and you can move through these things.
Yeah.
And that's when you have to start looking at what's not working, right?
Right.
Because if it's, I'm pouring myself a glass of wine as soon as I get in the door every night, and that's not serving you, looking for something else to replace this with. And we talked about this a little bit with Dr. Emily Bennett back on Monday when we were talking about, like what is a habit and creating habits and paying attention to your habits. And that was really that key piece of like just noticing what it is that you're doing automatically, especially if you have times in your day where you're like, what's even happening?
Yeah.
Just taking that inventory. And then the second question of, is this working?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think having support around that process will be very helpful for people who are like me, who maybe are very regimented. Like, I did things the same way for a really freaking long time. And then when suddenly those rituals had to be changed, I kind of felt at a loss for what I should do to replace them. And there wasn't a specific person to ask that question to, you know what I mean? So when I'm seeing you talking about the Momentum Club and how this is a piece of what this community is for, to offer each other support through the process of adapting your habits, I'm like, I totally needed that a few months ago when the gyms closed. And I was like, oh, I have been going to a yoga studio or a gym 4 or 5 days a week for 10 years, almost religiously, so it was just so ingrained in who I was. And when that disappeared overnight, I didn't know what to do.
It was very, I want a word for being knocked off center, decentering.
Or like destabilizing.
I quickly learned that all of my favorite hobbies, all of my favorite recreational activities were breathing with other humans.
Right.
Yoga and choral singing.
Okay.
Where I go to a room and breathe with other people for like at least an hour, preferably 90 minutes.
Right.
So quickly it was like, okay, how am I going to, spend time with people and get the variety of physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual benefits that 10 hours a week of breathing with other people between yoga and choral singing was giving me.
Right.
Knowing that it was going to be a long time before I had access to those things. And we're still not really there. I can kind of go to a class, I can kind of sing a little bit, but it's not normal the way the pandemic was. And so some of that's been pulling things into my own and doing individual breath work and really developing my meditation practice. That's in a very different place than it was prior. So that's been really, really positive. Walking's my new yoga.
Yeah.
And then finding other ways to be with other people, like finding online communities, and at this point creating an online community, because I've been so impacted by the way that getting together online with others that can, and not just like any people, but like, what groups that like can hold you accountable, places where you can show up and actually be honest about like, this is going well, this is not going well. And there's that non-judgmental space for that.
Yeah.
I find there's not a ton of that in the world.
Yeah.
And I think we need more. I need more.
Yes.
I think people need more. So that's what.
And I think if you're with the way you are talking about this offering, it's going to attract a certain kind of person. And it makes me think of a term that I heard by Brene Brown recently that just really resonated with me. You've heard the term like-minded, right? Like you have your people, your like-minded people. But Brene Brown says sometimes it's more than that. It's like-spirited. And that's what I think of when you have a group of people who, it's more than just having a similar way of thinking, or it might not even be a similar way of thinking. It's something deeper than that and more spiritual that connects us on a level where maybe those subtle differences don't matter, because there's just something
Yeah.
deeper and more important there, you know?
Yeah. I love that way of spirit minded.
Yeah.
Yeah. More of a way of being than a way of
Yes.
thinking.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I feel that.
Thought you
Christy,
might like that.
anything else that you like have really learned in this like habit adaptation thing, other than we should all be looking at our habits to notice when they need to be adapted?
Yeah, I think, again, if there's anyone who's listening to this who is like me, you know, maybe a little bit more type A, you have your rituals, you've been doing the same things for a long time. Just know that if you find yourself a bit stuck right now and you're like, why is this not working when this has worked for me for a long time? It's normal and it's okay that you're feeling like that. And Dr. Katie's group that she's putting together is literally the perfect place for you, because it's a basically a support for going through that process, and maybe even, you know, getting inspiration from others and ideas about what that next step will look like for you. Because I know for me, I had to try and figure that out on my own, and it was a little bit painful. I wish I had more people in my corner who were helping me through that process. So I had you, which I'm very grateful for, but now there's an even bigger group of people that can be
Yes.
part of that journey. So I'm really excited for you. I think what you're creating is very unique. Not enough of this in the world, and you're bringing this to the forefront. And I just really strongly believe that community is medicine, and community is the piece of medicine that's been missing for the last year and a half. So thank you for the work that you're doing.
Oh, thank you, Kirsty, and thank you for sharing so honestly and vulnerably tonight about, you know, some of your health habits and sharing, you know, when they weren't working for you. I know I think sometimes when we're like healthcare professionals, we get this idea that like we should have it figured out. And the
Yes.
thing is, it's like we're learning. We know
Yeah.
lots about some things, but we're all students. We're all students of this life. I'm going to stop at we're students of life because I don't think I need to be more specific than that.
I think that pretty much sums it up.
Oh, amazing. Well, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. And thank you, Kirsty, for coming and talking about habits with me.
Thanks
If
for having
anybody is
me.
interested in checking out the Momentum Club, the link to join is in my bio. We have enrollment open just until tomorrow. Tomorrow's our last day.
Last chance.
So yeah, so if you have any questions on that, do reach out to me. Either comment below the video or reach out to me in my DMs. They are open for you. All right.
Fabulous.
Bye.
Bye. Have a good night.